Yuna had never expected to be here. A simple translator from Earth, standing in the polished halls of a diplomatic starship, waiting for alien royalty to arrive. Her hands were slightly sweaty, and she wiped them on her uniform for the third time in 5 minutes. The ship was called the Horizon's Edge, and it was the biggest vessel humans had ever built for peaceful purposes. It floated in neutral space, far from any planet or star, chosen specifically because it belonged to no one. Today, the Velhari Empire would send their royal family to discuss peace with the United Earth Coalition. Yuna had studied the Velhari language for 6 years. She knew their words, their grammar, and their formal speech patterns. But she had never met one in person. No human had, except for a few soldiers who had seen them during the short but bloody border conflicts 2 years ago. The war had ended quickly. Neither side had won, and neither side had lost. They had simply agreed to stop fighting and start talking. It had taken 2 years of careful messages and slow negotiations to reach this moment. Ambassador Kang stood beside Yuna, his gray hair neatly combed, and his posture perfect. He was an old man who had spent his entire life working for peace between nations on Earth. Now he was trying to bring peace between species. "Remember," he said quietly, "the Velhari value strength and control above all else. They see emotion as weakness. Do not smile too much. Do not show fear, and whatever you do, do not touch them unless they touch you first." Yuna nodded. She had read all the briefings. The Velhari were tall, elegant beings with pale blue skin and silver eyes. They moved with grace and spoke with precision. Their culture was built on hierarchy and discipline. Children obeyed parents. Citizens obeyed nobles. Nobles obeyed the royal family. And everyone obeyed the queen. A soft chime echoed through the hall. The massive doors at the far end began to open. Yuna held her breath. The first to enter were the guards. They were tall, even for Velhari, dressed in black armor that seemed to absorb light. Their faces showed nothing. They moved like shadows, silent and deadly, and took positions along the walls. Then came the nobles. They wore flowing robes of deep purple and dark blue, and they walked with their heads held high. Their expressions were cold, almost bored, as if meeting humans was beneath them. Finally, the royal family entered. Queen Vial came first. She was the most striking being Yuna had ever seen. Her skin was a deeper blue than the others, almost like the ocean at night. Her silver eyes seemed to glow, and her white hair was arranged in an elaborate style that must have taken hours to create. She wore a crown of black metal and jewels that sparkled like stars. The queen moved slowly, deliberately, as if every step was a statement of power. She looked at the human delegation with an expression that was impossible to read. Not hostile, not friendly, simply observing. Behind her came Princess Sarah. She was younger than the queen, perhaps the equivalent of a human in her 30s. Though Yuna knew the Velhari lived for centuries, Sarah was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way. Her eyes were cold, and her posture was rigid. She looked like someone who had never relaxed in her entire life. And behind the princess, holding her mother's hand, was a small child. Yuna felt her heart skip. No one had mentioned a child. The little girl was tiny, perhaps 5 or 6 years old by human standards. Her skin was the palest blue, almost white, and her silver eyes were huge in her small face. She wore a miniature version of her mother's formal robes, and her white hair was braided with small gems. But something was wrong. The child's grip on her mother's hand was too tight. Her eyes darted around the room like a frightened animal. While everyone else walked with confidence, this little girl moved like she was trying to disappear. Yuna had worked with children before, back on Earth. She had taught English to refugee children who had lost their homes, their families, their sense of safety. She knew what fear looked like on a child's face. This child was terrified. Ambassador Kang stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Queen Vael, Princess Sarah, we are honored by your presence. The United Earth Coalition welcomes you in the spirit of peace and cooperation." Yuna translated his words into Velhari, keeping her voice steady and formal. The queen inclined her head slightly. It was barely a movement, But in Velhari culture, it was a sign of acknowledgement. "We accept your welcome," she said. Her voice was deep and smooth, like silk over steel. "Let us hope this meeting brings understanding between our peoples." Yuna translated, and Ambassador Kang smiled carefully. Just enough to be polite, but not enough to seem weak. The formal greetings continued. Names were exchanged, titles were announced. It was all very proper and very dull. Yuna translated each word perfectly, but her attention kept drifting to the child. The little girl, whose name was announced as Lyra, never spoke. She never moved unless her mother moved. She kept her eyes on the floor, and her small hands were clenched into fists at her sides. None of the Velhari seemed to notice. Or perhaps they did notice and simply did not care. In their culture, children were expected to be silent and obedient. A frightened child was not a concern. It was simply a child who had not yet learned proper control. But Yuna noticed, and it bothered her. The delegation moved to a large meeting room where a long table had been prepared. Chairs had been specially designed to accommodate both human and Velhari bodies. Refreshments were offered, though no one touched them. Everything was careful, measured, controlled. Yuna took her position behind Ambassador Kang, ready to translate whatever was needed. The queen sat at the head of the Velhari side, with Princess Sarah beside her. Little Lyra was placed in a chair next to her mother, where she sat perfectly still, like a doll. The negotiations began. They talked about borders and trade routes. They discussed resources and technology. They argued politely about past conflicts and future possibilities. It was exactly as boring as Yuna had expected, but she kept watching Lyra. The child never moved. She never fidgeted. She never looked around with curiosity like a normal child would. She simply sat there, frozen, her eyes fixed on some point in the distance. At one point, Ambassador Kang made a joke. It was a small one, carefully chosen to be inoffensive. The humans chuckled politely. The Velhari remained silent, but Lyra flinched. It was tiny, almost invisible. Just a small twitch of her shoulders. But Yuna saw it. The child had flinched at the sound of laughter. What kind of life had this little girl lived? Yuna wondered. That laughter made her afraid. The meeting lasted for 3 hours. When it finally ended, both sides agreed to continue discussions the next day. The Velhari would stay aboard the Horizon's Edge in specially prepared quarters. As everyone stood to leave, Yuna found herself near the door as the royal family passed. The queen swept by without a glance. Princess Sarah followed, her expression unchanged, and then came Lyra. For just a moment, the child's eyes lifted from the floor. They met Yuna's eyes. And in that brief second, Yuna saw something that made her heart ache. She saw loneliness, deep, terrible loneliness. Then Lyra looked away and followed her mother out of the room. Yuna stood there for a long moment after they had gone. She thought about the briefings she had read, about Velhari culture and their fear of weakness. She thought about that little girl, so small and so scared, surrounded by people who saw her fear as a flaw. She did not know it yet, but that single moment of eye contact would change everything. 3 days passed aboard the Horizon's Edge. The negotiations continued each morning and afternoon, filled with careful words and even more careful silences. Yuna translated every sentence, every pause, every subtle shift in tone. She was exhausted, but she did her job well. And every day, she watched Lyra. The child was always there, sitting beside her mother during meetings. She never spoke. She barely moved. She was like a ghost in expensive clothes, present but not really there. Yuna learned more about Velhari culture during those 3 days. She learned that royal children were raised by servants, not parents. Physical affection was considered inappropriate. A child was meant to be trained, not loved. Emotions were weaknesses to be eliminated, not feelings to be comforted. It explained so much about Lyra. And it broke Yuna's heart. On the evening of the 3rd day, Yuna was walking through the ship's observation deck. It was a large room with huge windows that looked out at the stars. Most people were at dinner, so the deck was empty and quiet. Yuna liked it here. It helped her think. She stood by the window, looking at the distant lights of 1,000 suns, when she heard a small sound behind her. She turned around. Lyra stood in the doorway. The child was alone, which surprised Yuna. Royal Velhari children were never alone. There were always guards, servants, or family members watching them. Lyra looked different without her formal robes. She wore simple sleeping clothes, pale blue like her skin. Her white hair was loose around her shoulders. Without the gems and braids, she looked even younger and smaller. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Lyra took a small step forward. And another. And another. She stopped about 10 feet away from Yuna, close enough to see clearly but far enough to run if needed. Her silver eyes were wide and uncertain. Yuna did not move. She remembered Ambassador Kang's warning about not approaching the Velhari, but Lyra had come to her. That had to mean something. "Hello," Yuna said softly, using the Velhari language. Lyra flinched slightly at the sound, but she did not run away. "You speak our words," the child said. Her voice was quiet, barely more than a whisper. It was the first time Yuna had heard her speak. "Yes," Yuna said. "I learned your language so I could help our people talk to each other." Lyra tilted her head, studying Yuna with those huge silver eyes. "Why do you look at me?" The question caught Yuna off guard. "What do you mean?" During the meetings," Lyra said. "You look at me. No one else does." "Why?" Yuna thought carefully before answering. She did not want to frighten the child or say something wrong. "I noticed that you seemed uncomfortable. I was worried about you." Lyra's eyes widened. "Worried? About me?" "Yes." "Why?" It was such a simple question, asked with such genuine confusion. Yuna realized that this child had probably never had anyone worry about her before, not in the way humans understood worry. "Because you looked scared," Yuna said honestly. "And when I see someone who is scared, I want to help them feel safe." Lyra was silent for a long moment. She seemed to be thinking about something very hard. Then she asked, "What is safe?" Yuna's heart ached. What kind of life had this child lived that she did not know what safety felt like? She knelt down slowly, bringing herself closer to Lyra's height. "Safe is when you do not have to be afraid. When you know that nothing bad will happen to you. When you can relax and just be yourself." Lyra's small hands twisted together nervously. "I do not know how to do that." "That's okay," Yuna said gently. "It's something you learn. And sometimes, other people help you learn it." "How?" Yuna thought for a moment. "Well, on my world, when a child is scared, we hold them close. We speak softly to them. We tell them that everything will be all right. We stay with them until the fear goes away." Lyra stared at her like she was describing magic. "You touch your children?" "Yes, all the time. We hug them. We kiss their foreheads. We hold their hands." Yuna smiled softly. "It helps them know they are loved." "Loved," Lyra repeated the word like it was foreign to her. In a way, Yuna supposed it was. "It means caring about someone deeply," Yuna explained. "Wanting them to be happy. Wanting to protect them from anything that might hurt them." Lyra was quiet for so long that Yuna thought the conversation was over. Then, very slowly, the child took another step forward. And another. Until she was standing right in front of Yuna. "Can you show me?" Lyra asked in a tiny voice. "What it feels like." Yuna felt tears threatening to form in her eyes. This small child, this princess of a mighty empire, was asking to be shown what comfort felt like. It was the saddest thing she had ever heard. "Are you sure?" Yuna asked. "I do not want to do anything that would get you in trouble." Lyra glanced toward the door, then back at Yuna. "No one knows I am here. I sneaked away. I wanted to find you." "Why me?" "Because you looked at me," Lyra said simply. "No one ever looks at me." Yuna could not refuse. She opened her arms slowly, giving Lyra plenty of time to change her mind. "Come here," she said softly. Lyra hesitated. Her whole body was tense, like she was about to do something forbidden. Then, with a small, Desperate sound, she rushed forward and threw herself into Yuna's arms. The child was trembling. Her small body shook against Yuna's chest. And after a moment, Yuna realized Lyra was crying. Silent tears. The kind that came from someone who had learned never to cry out loud. Yuna held her gently, one hand on the child's back, the other cradling her head. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're okay. You're safe." Lyra cried harder. It was like a dam had broken inside her, releasing years of hidden pain. She clutched Yuna's uniform with her small fists and buried her face against Yuna's shoulder. "I'm so tired," Lyra sobbed quietly. "I'm always so scared. Everyone wants me to be strong, but I don't know how. I don't know how to not be scared." "Being scared doesn't mean you're not strong," Yuna said softly. "Even the bravest people get scared sometimes. The difference is having someone to help you through it. I don't have anyone. You have me," Yuna said without thinking. "Right now, in this moment, you have me." They stayed like that for a long time. Yuna held the crying child and stroked her hair and whispered soft words of comfort. She knew she was probably breaking 100 rules. She knew that if anyone found out, there could be serious consequences for both of them, but she did not care. In that moment, all that mattered was this small, frightened girl who had never been held before. Eventually, Lyra's tears slowed. Her trembling stopped. She stayed in Yuna's arms, but now she was calm, almost peaceful. "I have to go back," Lyra whispered. "They will notice I am gone." "I know," Yuna said. Lyra pulled back slightly and looked up at Yuna's face. Her silver eyes were red from crying, but there was something new in them. Something that almost looked like hope. Will you be at the meeting tomorrow?" Lyra asked. "Yes, I'll be there. Can I look at you?" "During the meeting? Just to remember this?" Yuna smiled softly. "You can look at me any time you want," Lyra nodded. She stepped back reluctantly. Like leaving Yuna's arms was physically painful. Then she turned and walked toward the door. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back. "Yuna," she said. It was the first time she had used Yuna's name. "Thank you." Then she was gone. Yuna stood alone on the observation deck, surrounded by stars. Her uniform was damp with a child's tears. Her arms felt empty. She knew she had done something dangerous. She had formed a connection with a Velhari royal child, crossing cultural boundaries that had existed for centuries. If the queen found out, it could destroy the peace talks. It could start another war. But when she thought of Lyra's face, of the hope she had seen there, she could not bring herself to regret it. Some things were more important than politics. The 5th day of negotiations was supposed to be special. Both sides had agreed to hold a formal ceremony to mark the progress they had made. It would not be a peace treaty, not yet, but it would be a public declaration of good intentions. The Great Hall of the Horizon's Edge had been transformed. Banners hung from the ceiling, half in Earth's colors and half in the deep purple of the Velhari Empire. Long tables held food from both worlds. Musicians played soft music that tried to blend human and Velhari traditions. Everyone was there. Human diplomats in their finest suits. Velhari nobles in their most elaborate robes. Guards from both sides standing along the walls. Cameras recorded everything for the people back home, both on Earth and in the Velhari Empire. Yuna stood near the back of the room, wearing a formal dress she had borrowed from another translator. It was dark blue, simple, but elegant. Her job today was not to translate speeches but to be available if anyone needed help communicating. She had not spoken to Lyra since that night on the observation deck. But during every meeting, she had felt the child's eyes on her. Brief glances, quickly hidden. Small moments of connection in a room full of strangers. Today, Lyra sat on a raised platform with the rest of the royal family. She wore white robes covered in silver embroidery, and her hair was arranged in an elaborate style, with crystals woven through it. She looked beautiful. She also looked terrified. Yuna could see it in the tightness of her shoulders, the paleness of her already pale face, the way her hands gripped the arms of her chair. Something was wrong. The ceremony began with speeches. Ambassador Kang spoke first, his words careful and diplomatic. Queen Vael responded with equal formality. Both speeches were translated and broadcast to screens throughout the room. Then came the formal presentation. This was the part Yuna had been worried about. In Velhari culture, important ceremonies often included demonstrations of power. Not violence, exactly, but displays meant to impress and intimidate. The Velhari had brought something to show the humans. Queen Vael raised her hand, and the room fell silent. "We have brought a gift," she announced. "A demonstration of Velhari might, so that our new friends may understand the strength of the alliance they are forming." The great doors at the end of the hall opened. Yuna's breath caught in her throat. A creature walked in. It was massive, easily 12 feet tall, with 4 powerful legs and a body covered in dark scales. Its head was like a nightmare, with rows of teeth and 6 glowing red eyes, chains wrapped around its body, held by a dozen Velhari handlers. A Vorax. Yuna had read about them in the briefings. They were apex predators from one of the Velhari colony worlds, so dangerous that hunting them was considered the ultimate test of a warrior. The Velhari had brought one here, chained and controlled, to show that they could dominate even the most terrifying beasts. The humans in the room shifted nervously. Some stepped back. A few reached for weapons they were not carrying. The creature was horrifying, even in chains. The Vorax was led to the center of the room. It moved slowly, its red eyes scanning the crowd. It was calm for now, but Yuna could see the coiled power in its muscles. This was a killer, held back only by chains and handlers. Queen Vael smiled coldly. "Do not be afraid," she said. "The Vorax is completely under our control. It has been trained since birth. It will not harm anyone here." She raised her hand again. The handlers released the chains. Several humans gasped. Yuna felt her heart stop for a moment. But the Vorax did not attack. It simply stood there, still and obedient, waiting for commands. "You see," Queen Vael said proudly, "the Velhari do not just defeat our enemies. We control them. We turn monsters into tools." Ambassador Kang applauded politely. Other humans joined in, though their applause was nervous. The Velhari nobles looked smug. Everything was going according to plan. Then the Vorax moved. It was sudden. One moment the creature was still, and the next it lunged forward, its massive jaws snapping at the air. The handlers shouted and grabbed for the chains. But the Vorax was too fast. It broke free and charged across the room. People screamed. Bodies dove out of the way. Guards raised weapons but hesitated to fire, afraid of hitting bystanders. And on the raised platform, Lyra saw the monster coming toward her. The child screamed. It was a high, piercing sound full of pure terror. She jumped from her chair and ran. Not thinking, not planning, just fleeing from the nightmare in front of her. Princess Sarah grabbed for her daughter but missed. Queen Vael shouted commands that no one could hear over the chaos. The Velhari guards moved to intercept the creature, but they were too far away. Lyra ran blindly through the crowd. People were everywhere, pushing and shoving. She was so small, so easy to knock over. She stumbled and nearly fell, then kept running, and then she saw Yuna. The human woman was standing near the wall, her arms open, her face calm despite the chaos around her. Lyra did not think. She simply ran. She crossed the distance in seconds, weaving through legs and around fallen chairs, and when she reached Yuna, she did not stop. She ran behind the human woman and pressed herself against Yuna's back, wrapping her small arms around Yuna's waist from behind. "Help me," she sobbed. "Please, please help me." Yuna turned slightly, putting herself between Lyra and the rest of the room. She placed one hand over the child's hands, holding her tight. "I've got you," she said firmly. "You're safe. I won't let anything hurt you." The Vorax had stopped. The handlers had finally regained control, wrapping new chains around the creature and forcing it back. It had not actually attacked anyone, Perhaps it had simply been startled by the noise, or confused by the strange environment. Whatever the reason, the danger was over. But no one in the room was looking at the Vorax anymore. Everyone was staring at Yuna and Lyra. The human translator, a nobody from Earth, was standing with the Velhari princess's daughter hiding behind her. The child was clinging to a human like she was the only safe thing in the universe. Silence fell over the hall. Queen Vale's face was frozen in shock. Her silver eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open. In all her centuries of life, she had never seen anything like this. Princess Sarah looked even worse. Her cold expression had shattered completely. She stared at her daughter, at the human her daughter was holding. With an expression of complete disbelief, a Velhari noble whispered something, then another. The murmurs spread through the room like wildfire. A royal child had shown weakness, had run from danger, had sought comfort from a human, of all creatures. It was unthinkable. It was shameful. It was the greatest breach of protocol anyone could imagine. Yuna felt the weight of every stare. She knew she should let go. She knew she should step away, pretend this had not happened, try to minimize the damage. But Lyra was still shaking behind her, still crying, still holding on like her life depended on it. Yuna made her choice. She stood tall and kept her hand over Lyra's. She met Queen Vale's eyes without flinching. She did not apologize. She did not bow. She simply stood there, protecting a frightened child, and dared anyone to tell her she was wrong. The silence stretched on. Then Queen Vale spoke. Her voice was quiet, but in the silent room, everyone heard it. "What," she said slowly, "is the meaning of this?" The words were directed at Yuna. The question demanded an answer. Yuna took a deep breath. She knew that whatever she said next would change everything. For herself, for Lyra, for the negotiations, maybe for both their peoples. She thought of the briefings. She thought of Ambassador Kang's warnings about Velhari culture. She thought of everything she was supposed to say, everything that was politically correct and diplomatically safe. Then she thought of the child behind her, crying and afraid, who had never known what it felt like to be protected, and she decided to tell the truth. Yuna stood in the silent hall with hundreds of eyes on her. Behind her, Lyra was still holding on, still trembling, still crying softly. In front of her, Queen Vale waited for an answer, her face like carved ice. "The meaning," Yuna said clearly, "is that a child was afraid, and I helped her." The room seemed to hold its breath. Queen Vale's eyes narrowed. "You helped her? A human? Helped a princess of the Velhari Empire?" "Yes." "By what right?" Yuna did not look away. "By the right of anyone who sees a child in pain." "I needed no other permission." Gasps echoed through the hall. Velhari nobles whispered angrily to each other. Human diplomats looked horrified. Ambassador Kang closed his eyes like he was watching his life's work collapse. Princess Sarah stepped forward, her face twisted with emotion. "Release my daughter," she commanded. "Remove your hands from her immediately." Yuna felt Lyra's grip tighten. The child whimpered and pressed closer. "I cannot do that," Yuna said quietly. "Cannot?" Princess Sarah's voice rose. "You dare to refuse?" "I am not refusing," Yuna said. "Your daughter is holding me. When she is ready to let go, she will. But I will not force her away. When she is scared." "She is not scared," Princess Sarah said harshly. "She is being weak. She is shaming our family, our empire, our entire people." "She is a child," Yuna replied. "Children get scared. It is not weakness. It is not shame. It is simply being young. Velhari children do not show fear." "Then perhaps they should." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Princess Sarah's face turned an angry shade of deep blue. Guards on both sides tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Queen Vale raised one hand. Everyone froze. The queen descended from the platform, moving slowly across the hall. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship. She stopped just a few feet from Yuna, looking down at the human with those ancient silver eyes. "You speak boldly for someone in your position," Queen Vale said. "Do you understand the consequences of what you have done?" "I understand that I may have ruined the peace talks," Yuna said. "I understand that my career is probably over. I understand that I may have started a war." She paused. But I also understand that none of that matters as much as one frightened child." "How can you say that?" Queen Vale demanded. "Billions of lives depend on these negotiations. The future of two civilizations hangs in the balance. And you would risk it all for one child?" "Yes," Yuna said without hesitation. "Every time." Without question, Queen Vale stared at her. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the Queen spoke again, her voice quieter now. "Why?" Yuna thought carefully about how to answer. She needed the Queen to understand. Not just hear the words, "Because that is what we believe," she said finally. "On Earth, we believe that children are precious. All children. We believe that protecting them is not just a duty but a sacred trust. We believe that a society should be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members. We protect our children," Queen Vile said stiffly. "We give them the best education, the finest trainers, the strongest preparation for their futures. But do you comfort them?" Yuna asked. "When they are scared? Do you hold them? When they cry? Do you wipe their tears? When they feel alone? Do you tell them they are loved?" The Queen was silent. "Your granddaughter came to me," Yuna continued. "She found me alone on the observation deck, and she asked me to show her what comfort felt like. She had never experienced it before. A princess of the greatest empire in the galaxy, and she did not know what a hug was." Princess Sarah made a small sound, almost like she had been struck. "I held her," Yuna said. "I let her cry. I told her she was safe. And for the first time in her life, she felt what it was like to be protected. Not trained, not prepared, just loved." "Love is weakness," Queen Vale said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. "No," Yuna said firmly. "Love is strength. The greatest strength there is. It is what makes us fight when we should run. It is what makes us sacrifice for others. It is what holds families together, communities together, civilizations together." She turned slightly, looking down at Lyra still pressed against her back. The child had stopped crying. She was listening. "Lyra," Yuna said gently, "can you look at me?" Slowly, the child loosened her grip. She stepped to the side so she could see Yuna's face, while still staying close. "Are you feeling better?" Yuna asked. Lyra nodded. Her face was stained with tears, but her eyes were clearer now. Calmer. "Good." Yuna smiled at her. "You were very brave, coming to find me when you were scared. That took courage." "I was not brave," Lyra whispered. "I ran away. Everyone saw." "Running to safety is not cowardice," Yuna said. "Knowing when to ask for help is one of the bravest things a person can do. Never be ashamed of that." Lyra looked at her mother, then at her grandmother. Her small face was uncertain. "Mother," she said quietly, "I am sorry for shaming you." Princess Sira opened her mouth to respond, but Queen Vielle spoke first. "Wait." The Queen was staring at her granddaughter with an expression Yuna could not read. Something was happening behind those silver eyes, some internal struggle that the rest of the room could not see. "Lyra," Queen Vielle said slowly. "Come here." The child hesitated. She looked at Yuna. "It's okay," Yuna said. "Go to your grandmother." Lyra walked forward on unsteady legs. She stopped in front of the Queen and bowed her head, waiting for punishment. But Queen Vielle did not punish her. Instead, she did something no one expected. She knelt down. The most powerful being in the Velhari Empire lowered herself to her granddaughter's level. Her elaborate robes pooled around her on the floor. Her crown caught the light as she bent her head. "Lyra," she said softly. "Look at me." The child raised her eyes. "Are you still afraid?" Lyra nodded. "Of the creature?" "Of everything," Lyra whispered. "Always." Queen Vielle was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was strange, almost broken. "I was too," she said. "When I was your age, I was afraid all the time. But no one ever held me. No one told me it was acceptable. I learned to hide it instead. I buried it so deep that I forgot it was there." Princess Sarah gasped. "Mother, I thought I was being strong," the queen continued. "I thought I was teaching our people to be strong. But perhaps I was just teaching them to be alone." She looked at Yuna, and for the first time, her expression was not cold or suspicious. It was something closer to wonder. "You humans are strange creatures," Queen Vale said. "You are not the strongest species. Not the smartest. Not the most advanced. Your technology is primitive. Your empires are small. By every measure we use to judge worth, you should be beneath our notice." She paused. "And yet you understand something we do not. Something we have lost. Or perhaps never had." "What is that?" Yuna asked. Queen Vile looked back at Lyra. At her frightened granddaughter, who had never known comfort until a human showed it to her. "How to be gentle," she said. "How to be kind, without being weak. How to love, without losing yourself." She reached out slowly, hesitantly, like she was trying something for the first time. Her hand touched Lyra's cheek. The child flinched. Then, when nothing bad happened, she leaned into the touch. "Grandmother," Lyra whispered. "I am sorry," Queen Vale said. "I am sorry we taught you to be afraid of being afraid. I am sorry no one held you when you needed it." Tears began to fall down the queen's face. Silver tears, running down blue cheeks. The ruler of the Velhari Empire was crying in front of her entire court. And then she pulled her granddaughter into her arms. It was awkward. Clearly, she had never done it before. Her arms were stiff, her posture uncertain, but she held Lyra close, and she did not let go. Lyra collapsed against her grandmother and sobbed. Not from fear this time, but from relief. From joy. From finally being held by someone who was supposed to love her. Princess Sarah stood frozen, watching her mother and daughter embrace. Tears were streaming down her face too, though she seemed unaware of them. The entire hall was silent. Velhari nobles stared in disbelief. Human diplomats watched with wide eyes. Guards on both sides had forgotten their posts. History was being made, and everyone knew it. Yuna stood alone, watching the royal family finally connect. Her own eyes were wet. Ambassador Kang appeared beside her. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. "Well," he said quietly. "That was not in the diplomatic briefing." Yuna laughed softly. "No," she agreed. "I suppose it was not. I suppose it was not." They watched together as Queen Vale held her granddaughter and Princess Sarah finally stepped forward to join them, wrapping her arms around both of them. 3 generations of Velhari royalty, learning to be a family for the first time, all because one human had shown a child how to be held. The great hall had emptied. Most of the diplomats and nobles had been quietly escorted out, given time to process what they had witnessed. Only a small group remained: Ambassador Kang, Yuna, and the Velhari royal family. They sat in a small circle of chairs that had been arranged in a private corner. The formal ceremony was forgotten. The speeches and presentations no longer mattered. Something far more important was happening. Queen Vale still held Lyra on her lap. The child had fallen asleep, exhausted from crying, her small head resting against her grandmother's chest. The queen looked down at her with an expression of painful tenderness, like she was seeing her for the first time. "I have ruled the Velhari Empire for 400 years, Queen Vile said softly. "I have conquered worlds. I have commanded armies. I have made decisions that shaped the lives of billions." She paused. "But I have never done anything as difficult as this." "As what, Your Majesty?" Ambassador Kang asked carefully. "Admitting I was wrong." Princess Sarah sat beside her mother, her eyes red from crying but her posture straight. She had been silent since the embrace, processing everything that had happened. "Mother," she said slowly, "what do we do now? The court saw everything. The nobles will talk. They will say you showed weakness. that the royal family has been compromised. Let them talk, Queen Vale said. They have talked before. They will talk again. It changes nothing. But the alliance, Princess Sira pressed. The negotiations. We came here to secure peace with the humans. Not to learn something from them? Queen Vile looked at her daughter with tired eyes. That is exactly what we came here to do. We simply did not realize it. She turned her attention to Yuna, who had been sitting quietly, unsure of her place in this conversation. You, the queen said. Translator. What is your name again? Yuna, your majesty. Yuna. The queen tested the name on her tongue. You changed things today. You know that, yes? What you did in that hall will have consequences far beyond this ship. I did not mean to cause trouble, Yuna said carefully. I know. Queen Vielle almost smiled. Almost. That is what makes it so remarkable. You did not calculate the political implications. You did not consider your career or your safety. You simply saw a child who needed help, and you helped her. On Earth, that is what we are supposed to do. Yes. The Queen nodded slowly. I am beginning to understand that. You, humans, are raised differently than we are. You are taught to care for each other, to comfort each other, to love each other openly. We thought this made you soft. We thought it was a flaw. And now? Ambassador Kang asked. Queen Vale looked down at Lyra, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Now, I wonder if it is the greatest strength you possess. She shifted slightly, adjusting the child's weight. The Velhari Empire is ancient and powerful. We have technology you cannot imagine. We have weapons that could destroy planets. We have conquered species that would make your worst nightmares seem pleasant. Her voice grew quieter. But we have forgotten how to be kind, how to be gentle, how to hold our children when they cry. We have traded those things for discipline and control, and we told ourselves we were stronger for it. Perhaps both are needed, Yuna said softly. Strength and gentleness, discipline and compassion. They do not have to be opposites. Queen Vielle met her eyes. You believe that? I know it. The strongest people I have ever met were also the kindest. The bravest soldiers are often the ones who fight to protect, not to conquer. Real strength is not about controlling others. It is about controlling yourself so that you can help those who need you. The Queen was quiet for a long time. The room was peaceful, filled with soft light and softer silence. Outside the windows, stars drifted slowly past. Finally, Queen Vale spoke again. I have a proposal. Ambassador Kang leaned forward. Your Majesty? The peace talks will continue, the Queen said. But I want to add something new. An exchange program. Velhari children coming to Earth to learn from human families. Human teachers coming to the Empire to work in our schools. An exchange of culture, Ambassador Kang said slowly. Not just treaties and trade agreements, but actual connection between our peoples. Yes, if my granddaughter can learn so much from one human in a few days, imagine what our children could learn in years. Imagine what we could learn from each other. Ambassador Kang glanced at Yuna, then back at the Queen. This would be unprecedented. No species has ever proposed something like this to humanity before. Then we will be the first. Queen Vael's voice grew firm, some of her old authority returning. The Velhari Empire does not do things halfway. If we are going to change, we will change completely. It will take time, Ambassador Kang said. Years, perhaps decades. Cultures do not transform overnight. I have centuries, Queen Vael replied, and I am patient when the goal is worth pursuing. Lyra stirred in her grandmother's arms. Her silver eyes opened slowly, blinking in confusion. Grandmother? She murmured. Did I fall asleep? Yes, little one, you did. I had a dream. Lyra rubbed her eyes. I dreamed that you held me. That you said you were sorry. Queen Vael's expression softened in a way that seemed almost painful. That was not a dream. In the Relling round, Lyra's eyes widened. It was real? It was real. The queen brushed a strand of white hair from the child's face. And I will do it again. Whenever you need me to. I promise. When 9-1 BU. I can't have 1 BU. I promise. Lyra's face lit up with a smile so bright it seemed to glow. She threw her arms around her grandmother's neck and hugged her tight. Thank you, grandmother. Thank you so much. Queen Vial held her close. Over Lyra's shoulder, she looked at Yuna. Her silver eyes were wet. No, she said quietly. Thank Yuna. She is the one who showed us what we were missing. Lyra turned in her grandmother's arms to look at the human woman. Yuna saved me, she said seriously. She is my friend. Yes, Queen Vale agreed. She is. And I hope she will remain so for many years to come. Yuna felt tears rolling down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. I would like that very much, Your Majesty. No more, Your Majesty, the Queen said. In private, you may call me Vial. It has been centuries since anyone has. I think I would like to hear it again. The negotiations continued for another week. Treaties were signed. Trade agreements were established. Borders were settled. But the real work had already been done in that moment, when a child ran to a stranger for comfort and found something her own people had forgotten how to give. 1 year later, Yuna stood on a landing pad on the Velhari homeworld. Behind her, a ship was unloading the first group of human teachers who would live and work in the Empire. In front of her, a small figure broke from the crowd and ran toward her. Lyra had grown taller. Her white hair was longer. Her silver eyes were brighter. But her smile was the same as she threw herself into Yuna's arms. You came back, Lyra cried. Grandmother said you would. But I was still scared you might not. Create. Yuna hugged her tight. I will always come back. I promised? Remember? I remember. Lyra pulled back and looked up at her. Grandmother hugs me every day now. Mother too. They say they are still learning, but they are getting better. I am glad. And there are other children now, coming from all over the Empire, to learn from humans, to learn how to be. Lyra paused, searching for the right word. Kind? Yuna suggested. Yes. Lyra smiled. Kind. It is a good word. I like it. Queen Vial approached them, walking without guards or ceremony. She looked different than she had on the horizon's edge. Softer somehow, despite the crown still on her head. Yuna, she said. Welcome to our world. Thank you for inviting me, Vial. The Queen smiled. It was still a rare expression on her face, but it was becoming less so. Thank you for teaching us something we had forgotten. Something precious. What is that? Vale looked at her granddaughter. At the human teachers arriving behind Yuna. At the new future that was beginning on this day. That the measure of a civilization is not how much power it holds, she said, but how much love it gives. Yuna took Lyra's hand on one side and Vial's hand on the other. Together, the three of them walked forward into the light of an alien sun. And somewhere in the galaxy, on every world where the story was told, people began to understand something important about humanity. They were not the strongest species. Not the smartest. Not the most advanced. But they knew how to love. They knew how to comfort. They knew how to hold a frightened child and tell her everything would be all right. And in the end, that made all the difference.